What's up, Bib? All right, guys. Looks like there's a few of us, so we'll go ahead and get started here. I really wanted to actually kind of cruise through period 6 and then try to jump over to period 8. I mean, since it's such a large percentage of the test, I was thinking that, I think it'd probably benefit that we take some time going and do that. So hopefully a half hour for period 6, which means we're going to go a little bit faster. And then we'll go to period 8. And I think what we're going to do instead of using the book is I'm just going to kind of talk. I might have to use the book occasionally to remember about things. But I think I'm just going to look at our Google Doc review or the YouTube live review now that I changed the name of it. But anyways, just kind of look at period 6 and period 8 and kind of go through it. And then see if you guys have any specific questions. And then you guys can take some time kind of like, I don't know, we can go through, after I talk about period 6 and period 8, we can go through the book and kind of see if you have any specific questions. So hopefully you go back to, again, the YouTube live kind of period. And I'm looking at period 6 and period 8. Again, we're going to kind of skip period 7 due to the fact that was so recent, and we, took notes on that and did discuss it. I know kind of World War II went pretty fast and Great Depression went pretty fast, but I think we did a pretty good job, at least for the first half of it, for sure. Let's go ahead and take a look at period 6. So relationship between business and government. Remember that, we already ended with period 5. We were talking about the whiskey ring scandal and also the Boss Tweed affair. I remember Crash Course U.S. History does a great job of looking at that. So just the fact that business and government are hand in hand together, and there's a lot of corruption in government, right? We have brother-in-laws of the president making deals and not paying taxes, and there's multiple political cartoons from, critical newspaper articles just showing that big business has total control. And then another word for big business is a trust, right? So we're going to see, Teddy Roosevelt later in period 7 start doing some stuff called the antitrust, using the Sherman Antitrust Act, not to break up unions as it was used in the beginning, but really to break up these bad trusts, in his opinion, these ones that monopolize or have total control of these products and the prices, and because of that, there's not much competition, and also these are corrupting agents, right? Moving on to robber barons versus captains of industry. So obviously, those are our really most famous men that became successful. So we're talking about, J.P. Morgan Chase for the banking, talking about Andrew Carnegie with the steel, Rockefeller with the oil, and ultimately moving into railroads and their control of that. What we mean by robber barons is, did they take advantage of the situation? Did they manipulate the government? Did they take advantage of the working classes? Did they take advantage of small, poor farmers? There's a massive issues, and remember that the Interstate Commerce Clause comes out later out of this whole issue with basically railroads not being as fair or as equal to their big business partners as they are to small farmers, and the cost of moving their goods from the Midwest down over to, the shipping lanes, at least to Mississippi, and therefore going throughout to the world. We got organized labor strikes. Remember that they are primarily, if you see these CCOT, obviously that's continuing change over time, but the point of organized labor strikes is at the beginning, they're largely put down, right? We have the Pinkerton police, we have the National Guard. These state police and state military will come in and break them up, and at times things get violent, and in which time the military defends itself and kills these union workers, right? I mean, these unionists. And these unionists, like we talked about earlier with Indreen, it's not a union for the North, but in this case, we're talking about the labor unions. And so the labor unions began to, at this time, are really struck down a lot, right? And in fact, like I said, the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was primarily meant to probably put out the big business was used by big business and government and the judicial branch to actually take out organized labor, saying, hey, when you guys get together as workers, that's actually a big trust. You guys are working together, you're trying to monopolize wages, and we'll use that actually to break up unions. Social Darwinism and the gospel of wealth. This is different than the social gospel that was going to happen later. But the idea that, obviously, I think we're pretty clear about social Darwinism. If we need to go into that, let me know, but I don't think I need to really go into that. The gospel of wealth is the idea that, Andrew Carnegie specifically, he donated a lot of money back to parks, back to museums, back to universities. So the idea is that, once these Americans made it rich, it was their duty to go ahead and give money back. Today, we got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We all know who Bill Gates is, a pretty rich man, and he devotes a lot of money towards education, right? And we have students that have received a scholarship, which are basically full rides, right? Student last year that I taught, Olivia Hasu, is going to Cornell, and it's a very, very expensive Ivy League school, and she's going totally for free because of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the idea that if I make money off of my country and society, it's my job to reinvest it back into the community and back to people. And actually banks, just as a heads up, because I did work for a bank, by law, we have to reinvest money back into the community, right? Certain percent that we have to do. And we do. First time I actually came down to San Diego by myself was doing a Habitat Humanity project down in Barrio Logan, right? So we redid some houses, we cleaned up the street, cleaned up graffiti. And that was my first time actually here in San Diego, but that was because of a law that said that they had to give back to the community. So that's what the gospel of wealth is. Frontier Thesis, again, what's super cool about all of these things is that they're pretty recent, so I don't know if we have to review too much of it. Frontier Thesis by Frederick Jackson Turner. As you know, because of Manifest Destiny and because of Civil War and because of the Mexican-American War, we continue to expand westward. And he poses an idea that, along the edge of frontier, and what is a frontier? It's the edge between what we call like the cities and everything being established and the pioneers. And the pioneers are right at what we call the frontier, right? So they're running into Indians, they're running into theoretically open land, they're running into new terrain that they've never matched before. But along this area, this is where fights for slavery happened and ultimately led to the abolishment of slavery. This is in Wyoming where women will get the right to vote. We know in the Northwest Ordinance, as people moved west, they started developing schools and also ending slavery. So his thesis is his argument. Remember, that's what a thesis is. You guys have a thesis for a DBQ. But his argument is this. The United States has continually had a frontier, and along that frontier have been opportunities for young men, young families to get land, to establish themselves. And he begins to pose a question, what happens when the frontier closes? And we kind of saw that in a couple DBQs, right? Our most recent DBQ actually is a guy who says, hey, we got immigrants coming from the East Coast, and these were the Germans, the Irish coming from Europe. And now we got immigrants like the Japanese, like the Chinese, Mexicans coming from our South are immigrating. Eventually, all this land's going to be taken up. What's going to happen? And Frederick Jackson Turner, much before that document was written, asked kind of the same question. There's going to be a time in which we're going to have this manifest destiny complete, and we're going to have sea, the shining sea. And, from the West Coast to the East Coast, from the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, what do we have next? Where are the people going to have opportunity? People can't go to Los Angeles because some guy's going to have all the land, and basically like a big Thomas Jefferson family is going to have total control of that land and is going to rent it out and not actually give it out. And people won't own their own land, and this will turn into what we call Europe. Right. And we know what Europe is. It's fully this big class distinctions. And a lot of people can't move up with their individualism, right? By moving westward or being a gold miner, they're kind of stuck to being these classes. And what was amazing about America all during this period of history, from the colonies up until the closing of the frontier, was there were opportunities in land, there were opportunities in resources, there were opportunities in exploration. Well, what happens when we know what's inside the United States and the map has kind of been set? And he's saying, I don't know, but he knows that democracy and opportunities have always been on the frontier. And so if we're going to lose that, maybe we'll lose what it is to be American. Maybe we'll turn into Europe. So that's what he's saying, right? And we know that ultimately, in my opinion, manifest destiny hasn't ended, but it has become a worldwide phenomenon, right? We feel it's our duty to spread democracy and freedom and protect democracy and freedom, not here in the United States, but also around the entire world, whether it be Venezuela or Syria or Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan or whatever those things are, right? American Indians, during this time, it's the kind of the last hurrah of the Indians, right? You guys took a lot of notes on the Indian Wars. So, you probably want to go back and review. I can review a couple of those items, about a couple of the Indian Wars, but this is the last hurrah of the Indians. We get Plessy versus Ferguson. That is the court case that makes separate but equal. Don't even care about what it was about. It was really about talking about African Americans in the South. I don't really know what exactly happened, like the Marbury versus Madison case, where I can go into detail. But all we need to know is that it established basically legal segregation, legal prejudice at certain levels, right? The Gilded Age and the rise of the populace, the Gilded Age is this whole entire time. You guys know that, right? To be gilded in gold is to be like covered in gold. And this was kind of a time period that was quoted from the book Mark Twain, right? Mark Twain wrote a book at this time about the Gilded Age. Everything, there's all these job opportunities and people are getting rich, and Andrew Carnegie's building all these beautiful things, and Rockefeller Square in New York is happening. There's Times Square in New York, it's popping, right? And we're doing good. It's a little mini 1920s little thing happening here. But most importantly, we need to understand who the populists are. Remember the populists, again, Mario asked a question in period 3, going back to the common man. You remember the common man in period 3 is a white owning man, and probably a southerner and a farmer, and a small percentage that he's a slave owner. When we're talking about the common man, we're not talking about the multi-ethnic Elkhorn Valley High School. We're talking about, at that time, those are the people that were in power. The populists are not a far cry from that, guys. I told you guys that the populists are kind of turning to the progressives, but remember, the progressives also is Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson isn't progressive, but his view on racism and definitely his probably view on other minority groups was priced in racism. He was a Southerner. So when we talk about the populists are, remember, they're really a farm-based organization. Remember, they moved through a couple of platforms and alliances. First, the Farmers Alliance, and there's the Ocala platform, and ultimately they kind of formed the ideas of the populists. And ultimately, this third party, as we know, third parties never work in the United States, will get absorbed and become the progressives. So that's kind of an overview of period 6, of what I know about it. Just a little talk real quick. So I'll go back. I haven't been looking at the chat because I've been stuck on the Google Doc, but we'll go ahead and see if you guys have any questions based off of those. That way maybe you guys can really kind of go through your period 8 key concept and kind of ask some questions about period 8. Let me go ahead and help you guys get out there like we kind of did in class, because tomorrow you guys are going to have a test on period 8, right? And so, it's going to be 15% of the test. So I think that's what we should spend a good half hour of our time today. So we're going to do a half hour on period 6 and a half hour on period 8. And like I said, period 6 is relatively a little bit sooner. So why don't you guys give me some specific questions? So we'll start with Hillary. There's time did big business take over the economy? And was the government involved in the economy? Well, of course, the government's involved in the economy. It's going to have the treasury. It's going to still put taxes on. People still have to pay taxes. But the idea at this time is that there's definitely a corrupt development within government, and I'd argue it hasn't changed. Next year, when you guys begin understanding actually the rules of government and AP government, you're going to be like, so a politician, when he gets fired, basically becomes a lobbyist, and a lobbyist is a guy who's paid lots of money from a company to talk to the guy that just replaced him to make sure that laws are created on their behalf, and this is all totally legal. And free speech actually means money, and money is free speech, so you can't limit somebody's free speech, so you can't limit the amount of money that people can fundraise for a candidate, whether they be having hookups to big businesses or hookup to teacher unions. So it's just the idea of that during this time specifically, and there's examples, right? We got the Boss Tweed moment again. Tammany Hall. You can Google Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall. That was the time of a crash course where like brooms cost $16,000 or something like that for like 20 brooms, right? Just crazy amount of corruption happening where big business and the trusts are taking advantage of society, and the government isn't really protecting the society or the consumers, or definitely not the taxpayer. And they're not. It's not like they know who these taxes just come into the IRS and it gets funneled up, and then people got a lot of money. It's not like you take tax dollars from the citizen and say, thank you for my $20, and then you go over and hand it, right? You're just basically writing laws and writing things where Tammany Hall gets $16,000 for brooms, and a plasterer who was a horrible plasterer gets paid $1 million to do it, and another $2 million to fix what he did, which was horrible. So it's just it's more of a focus on corruption in government. Big business take over the economy. I mean, when we consider big business and the economy are together. So I think you're a little confused about that question, but hopefully I kind of answered about the government involvement of the economy. At this time, one word that we need to use, Hillary, is laissez-faire, right? Hands off. Adam Smith, capitalism, the idea that government should not be interfering at this time. Are monopolies okay? Monopolies are okay. Obviously, we have all these like Standard Oils and Standard Pacifics and the Union Pacifics, and all these different names for all these big businesses that are basically owned by the same company anyways, whether it be Rockefeller, Carnegie, or JP Morgan Chase giving loans to everybody and pretty much owning all of them through also probably stocks at this time, right? Through the purchase and sale of stocks, which we know banks do as well. So, big business and the economy, I think, are interwoven. I think we've talked about the government being, hands off. And even I'd say, again, my argument when we came to this point is it's not hands off. It's actually hands on. The government's helping the businesses take advantage. They're coming on the side of big business, not on the side of the worker that's asking for more money. They're coming on the side of big business, not the person that's saying, I don't know if you should have children working in factories at the age of 8 years old, right? Why are women being treated so differently? And they're like, no, we're not going to talk about that. So, I'd say even the argument that it might be even mercantilistic, right? The idea that your government should support that. And, mercantilism and communism, and at least the way in which China is practicing communism is very similar, right? China is basically choosing the winners that they want. Hey, like, oh, this guy looks like he has a pretty good solar power company. Sounds good. Let's give him a couple $2 billion and see if that gives him a competitive edge compared to the rest of the world so that he can invest in scientists and research and make the best solar panels possible. I think the government at this time is kind of mercantilistic, as in let's support our big government as much as possible. And again, who starts this story? It's really Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln does this during the Civil War in order to win the war. All right. Can you explain falling prices and rising costs? Yeah, I think you're really talking about probably the farms. And at this farm time, remember, we go through a lot of technology. We start using tractors, right? Instead of just doing things handmade. And what's happening is the supply of wheat is just going up, up, up. Well, you guys know if supply of something goes up, the price is going to go down, right? And so, we see these poor farmers, and this is why they create the populist moment. This is why they create these issues, is they're losing money all the time. Then they want to transfer their goods. They have to go through railroads who are taking money from them as well. They got government taking taxes all the time and using that to hook up big business. So you can see where these populists begin, looking at this whole thing that's going on and going, we're getting kind of screwed. As farmers, we better unite, or else, because big business has government, we better do something and try to hire some people and get some people in there that are going to support us. So period 6, hindering is mostly about big business, railroads, oil, and steel. Yeah, I'd put Manifest Destiny in there, the completion of it, right after it. Frontier Thesis, because of the American Indian aspect. I don't know. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. I mean, to be very clear, I go back to that student copy, and this is what I'm going to say to you one more time. It looks like it's about business and period 6. Business and government, making sure that some of the big businesses, aka Carnegie, Rockefeller, and all those guys. How did labor react to big business with these strikes? How did government support those strikes or not support them? Remember, they did not support them. They broke them up using the military. Social Darwinism and the gospel of wealth. Frontier Thesis, American Indians. Got to understand Plessy versus Ferguson during this time period. I guarantee there's going to be a one on there. It's almost as, like I said, very important, like McCullough versus Marbury versus Madison. I mean, those are that, and probably Brown versus the Board of Education are probably 3 of the most important court cases of all time, right? And maybe going back, let's go back to the other one. What was that one court case? I mean, it's right up here, right? Dred Scott versus Hanford. I mean, there's a reason why I'm playing those court cases, guys. It used to be that you have to memorize every freaking court case. Like, we went back a couple periods again, and there was like, under John Marshall, those million of court cases. That's how it used to be. And in my opinion, there's only 5 to 6 that you need to know. And so they're right here, ready to go for you. All right. So again, hindering, to answer your question, is pretty much outlined on there for period 6 on the YouTube live review. And the big business being corrupt and the whole government hands off unless they help big business and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. So homework, do we take notes on a key concept or on a different sheet of paper? Still a different sheet of paper, the same. All right, guys. So that's period 6. Unless you have any more questions, I did that kind of a review at the beginning. Trying to see if you guys have any more. If not, I'd like to move on to period 8 and just kind of answer guys the questions on period 8. The unfortunate thing about period 8 with not, and this whole thing that's kind of frustrating is that I'd love, and maybe next times for when we come back from break, you guys can teach me how I can do like a mirror image, because then I can pop up Google and show you like maps and use my cursor to kind of explain things to you guys, kind of like what they do in Khan Academy. I don't know if that's possible to do like a mirror image on a YouTube live. I'm sure you can. I can be able to do it. So as a review there, with your guys' permission, I think we should move on to period 8 and have you see what the questions you guys have for period 8. I'll do my best to use my hands to talk about things. I'll just have you guys, just Google it with me. I'll say, hey, Google, and look at the first picture, click that first one. I'll describe what it is for you guys. Yeah, the Frontier Thesis, we kind of went to this earlier. I don't know if you came in a little bit late, but basically it's the idea that since the American colonies, there's always been open land towards the West. And if you were a poor young man and you didn't have an opportunity, what you did is you got all your stuff, you ran away and you moved west and you found a piece of land, and you'd hope that you'd be successful on a piece of land, and maybe you'd be the next rich slave owner, or maybe the next rich independent farmer, or maybe the next rich liquor store owner. And I don't mean that like racistly or anything like that. There's general stores and all these stores that are needed for businesses and also farmers to be successful, all the way in the Ohio River Valley, going to now Kansas and Nebraska. But the point is as people moved west, there were opportunities in specifically open land. Yes, there were Native Americans there. Yes, there were Mexicans there. But remember our treatment of them. So theoretically, according to our white Anglo-Saxon, when I say our, what was typically the common man at the time, going back to Mario, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, they had always opportunities to move west. And what he says, and he sees examples of this, right? He sees example of this in the ending of slavery as we moved west. He sees this in examples of women getting the right to vote in Wyoming. He sees these examples of gold miners and all these young men just moving over to San Francisco and trying their best to, do the American dream, which is at time become super rich off of gold. And so he sees all these opportunities, and he just asks a question basically, and he says this, he's about to die, and he basically says this: what is going to happen to America? What's going to happen to our democracy, on our ability to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, are able to individually be able to make us have some social mobility, be able to go a little bit from a lower class to a middle class, from a upper class, when all the land might be taken up? What is going to happen? And again, my argument was that we began searching for more land, right, abroad, and we began taking advantage of those opportunities as well. Okay. Yasmin, period 8, concept, page A5. Can you explain? Okay, so Yasmin's going to period 8, and Hindrine's going back to laissez-faire. So I'm going to go, Yasmin, we'll go ahead and take care of that. And thank you for the page numbers. And I'll need to pull up a document, so it'll take me a couple seconds to do. So I'm going to stay, just for about 4 more minutes on period 6. So that led to imperialism. Yeah, but that's not what Frederick Dancer Turner's saying, right? That's not what he's saying in his Frontier Thesis. He's not saying that when he dies, there's going to be imperialism. He's just questioning at the time. My argument, as in Mr. Ayamatsu's argument, is that, and we can see this, is that when we industrialized, we needed specifically more resources, but even more importantly, more markets. And what's the word market? People to buy our stuff, right? We have a population thing that's happening here, but we basically hit our manifest destiny. And so who is going to be the people that are going to buy our stuff? Bam, it's going to be other people. And then we're going to go to Latin America, and we're going to take their land and make a tomato farm, make it a banana plantation, do some more sugar cane. And some of the, Colombians and Venezuelans and Argentinians and the Costa Ricans and the Mexicans are looking at us going, whoa, that's our land. That should be our banana plantation. That's our oil reserve that you're making money off. That was a big thing, and so, that America is going to move on to exploit more resources and markets, not only here in the United States when manifest is complete, but abroad. That's kind of my argument. Hendry and laissez-faire. What is it? Hands off, right? Literally went from French to hands off. That was the idea of capitalism, that government shouldn't be doing this mercantilism game anymore. It shouldn't be picking or choosing winners or losers. It shouldn't be helping people. It shouldn't be providing tax breaks or massive taxes. They should basically not do anything. Let these companies compete amongst each other. Everybody's selfish. They're going to create a great product. That's what happens when you have multiple cell phone companies compete with one another. You get better and better products. So let these things compete, and you're going to get better products and better economics, and let your country just have the best and the brightest compete with one another, and don't let government interfere with businesses in that way. The opposite is that if you don't let government interfere with businesses, you never get something called a minimum wage, right? Minimum wage is something that's created by the government. It's a law. It's forcing people to pay a certain amount of money. I guarantee there's plenty of businesses that would love to pay people way less of that. Another example is how governments get involved, and it's not truly laissez-faire capitalism, is if you go to a restaurant nowadays, you're going to see an increased cost on your bill. Like I went to a restaurant, I saw like a $5 cost, and this is basically to increase the wages of the waitresses, so they're not paid minimum wage. They're paid a little bit more than that. So what did the business owners do in this case? They handed it off to the customer. But there was a law that was created to basically help those individuals increase their minimum wage. Laissez-faire, so the imperialism, we got laissez-faire and imperialism. All right, so we're going to move on to period 8. We got about 30 minutes, so we'll go ahead and do that. All right. First, what do you guys mean? Page 85, 8.12c. Let's do it. And I'm so glad that Aisha gave me a question. I'm always looking for a question from Aisha, that's for sure. So let's see here. Give me a second, because like I said, I have to actually find that document on my computer. I'm not at school. So give me a second. And you guys said, let's see here. Sorry. Page 85. All right, 1CCC. Americans debated the merits of a large nuclear arsenal, the military industrial complex, and the appropriate power of the executive branch in conducting foreign and military policy. Oh, geez, man. First thing, let's circle military industrial complex. Where does that come from? A guy called Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dwight D. Eisenhower, you might sound familiar because he is the guy that led, he is a general that led D-Day. And D-Day was the storming of France, and where British and American troops left Great Britain and went to France to take out Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. So this is going to have a lot of key terms in there, kids. So here we go. So first one, military industrial complex. What do we need to know about it? This is Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell address. Who is Dwight D. Eisenhower? He was a very famous general in World War II. What does he say? He says this: we better be very careful about this new thing called the military industrial complex. He's warning Americans. Similar to George Washington sends a farewell address that warns, this is probably one of the second most famous farewell addresses of all time. Because after his tenure in 1950, let's go ahead and break down the word military industrial complex, and we'll see what we mean. The military using factories, and the factories getting paid by the military, and the military getting that money from the government in a massive complex problem. Sound familiar? So he is saying that when we have business in the charge of military and those two are working together, I'm concerned that business may be able to use its corruptive powers to get a lot of money for the military, and that money is coming from taxpayers. Be very concerned about it. He sees right before he leaves the beginning of the Cold War. I mean, he is the president that sees the Cold War happen in his eyes. Truman sees it a little bit, but after Truman comes Dwight D. Eisenhower. And when he sees this, he sees us getting ready to fight this massive war against the Russians. And the Russians are big. They are quite powerful. They have a lot of land. They've just acquired more and more countries in their Soviet Union and put those people to work. It kind of looks that communism and the Soviet Union are going to be successful. We know in 1989 the Berlin Wall will fall and that's going to go down. And he is very concerned that we are getting ready to build up for war, and that war is being funded by the American taxpayers, but all that money is going straight to the factories that they do it. Remember that Boeing, who is having a lot of issues right now, also produces a lot of our fighter jets. Remember, there are gun companies that produce a lot of our guns. There's bullet companies that produce a lot of our bullets. Our clothing companies produce our clothes. Our Oakley produces our eyeglasses. Oakley also produces their boots. There's a certain type of backpack that's not made by JanSport, but it's definitely a certain type of backpack that people have what they call government contracts, and he's concerned about that. Circle appropriate power of the executive branch in conducting foreign and military policy. And what you want to do is you want to put in the, gosh, I don't know what it's called, the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. During Vietnam, every president gets us more and more involved, but there's never really actually a declaration of war, which is quite interesting. We keep on sending what we call advisors over to help out the French, and then the French leave, and we send advisors to help our own advisors. And these advisors carry big guns and go on helicopters, and they're in a war. So I know it's hard to understand, but at this time, they just kept on increasing warfare, increasing troops. And ultimately, Congress goes, hold on for a second. You can't just have people go into these places for years at a time unless you declare war. Because last time I checked, in the Constitution, Congress has the right to declare war. You are the commander-in-chief, but if you want a war declaration, which then costs a lot of money, remember, we're in charge of the purse. We have all the money. You're just supposed to carry out the laws, and you're the commander-in-chief. But if you want that, which can cost a lot of money, you need the permission of the people, aka you need the permission of Congress. You can't just start using our money to do whatever the heck you want for years and years in time. And so they create the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. And let me go ahead and Google that real quickly. So sorry. But basically, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution says, yeah, you can send troops over there, I think, for like 60 days. But after that, you got to send them back. So, yeah. What was the purpose of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution? So actually, this is not it. I'm trying to figure out what it is. So sorry, I apologize for that, guys. But the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution was actually for President Lyndon B. Johnson. Let me figure out what it was for Nixon. Let's see. War Powers Act. There it is. Pretty sure. 1973. Yeah, so the War Powers Act of 1973. That's the one. And actually, I'm glad I talked about the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. Kind of got screwed up because, just as a heads up, let me go back to my key concept for you guys. But it says appropriate power. Well, one crazy side of this is the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which allows Lyndon B. Johnson to use as much money and as much stuff to stop communism as possible. That's in 1964. In 1973, under Richard Nixon, who will actually end the war in Vietnam, and we theoretically lose as like the last helicopters are leaving. We have all these South Vietnamese that are scared the North Vietnamese are just going to murder them, and we're just like ditching them. They're like hanging onto our helicopters. There's all these famous scenes. But on the opposite side, when we know we're about to lose the war, finally Congress goes, oh, hold on. We need to create the War Powers Act. In the future, if you want war, you need to go through us, and you can only have troops in a place for 60 or I think it's 90 days, actually. I think 3 months. So, Donald Trump could send troops for 90 days to the border as long as he wants. He doesn't need any permission from Congress. He can send them to Iraq if he wants to. He can send them wherever he wants. However, after 90 days, after that 91st day they're theoretically deployed, he needs to go back to Congress and get a declaration of war, or he needs to bring his troops back in. And again, that was in response to this just kind of what I call escalation of soldiers during the Vietnam War, after president doesn't want to lose Vietnam, doesn't want to submit to the domino theory, doesn't want to be the president that lost a country or divided a country based off of communism, but wants to be the president that wins communism, right? You don't want to be known as the president that lost anything or made a truce or maybe not a truce because we're still at war with North Korea, but, divide a country in half and we're one half one, right? We're Americans. We're supposed to be winning, especially this war game. So each of these presidents do that. So we get, again, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution is one key term for this that I would talk about, guys. Letter C, giving Lyndon B. Johnson, the same guy that did Great Society, all this money and all these soldiers to go fight a war, and the other side would be the War Powers Act, and that's for Richard Nixon, who ends the war. But at the end, they're saying, hey, you need to basically, we need to remind you, the Constitution says the Congress has the power to declare war. All right, so hopefully that helped that one. Let me scan around. Oh, there's the War Powers Act. Sorry, Yasmin. So you did get the War Power Act. Yeah. So again, but opposite of that would be Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. And it says, again, going back to the key concept, letter C, it says appropriate power, right? It went from one side, hey, Lyndon B. Johnson and the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution can do everything. Why is it called the Gulf of Tonkin? The Gulf of Tonkin is actually right by Vietnam, and there is a ship that was fired upon by the North Vietnamese, and it sank. And so everybody's pissed, right? American soldiers have died because of these communist Vietnamese up in the north, and bam. And actually, quick Google. I might be lying to you because I don't know actually if it just got fired upon or did anybody actually die. The Gulf of Tonkin incident. So I'm going Gulf of Tonkin resolution and Gulf of Tonkin incident. Tonkin, Tonkin. Complex naval event, coast of Vietnam. 2 unprovoked attacks by North Vietnamese torpedo boats on the destroyers that led to the Gulf of Tonkin. Yeah, so I don't think anybody dies. These 2 submarines attack these North Vietnamese, and what are the U.S. doing? They're like right off the coast of North Vietnam. So what do you think is going to happen? Of course, but us and provoking wars and hanging out and blaming Maines being blown up by Spanish miners and stuff like that, and weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, right? I mean, all these proved to be falsehoods but we premised our war on that. All right, period 8, key concept 831B, page 90, the Sun Belt regions. Yeah, Sun Belt place to get the sun. We're part of it. California, Arizona. It's basically the southern part of the United States. So if you know your states, California, Arizona, New Mexico, kind of. There's not that much in New Mexico. Texas, yes, even those southern states of Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. Most importantly, Florida. When you think of the Sun Belt region, you think the 2 most important states that pop up are California and Florida. And why are these called the Sun Belt? Because guess what? We have good weather. And guess who's going to go there? All of these old people in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? Today, during the summertime, because Arizona gets so hot, we get all of these Arizona people that come to San Diego, right? So if you ever go to the beach, there's just full of what we call zonies here in San Diego. Right? If you're in PV, you live there long enough, you go, oh, geez, the zonies are coming because the parking's going to be crazy. And, people need to get rescued because they don't know how to swim in the ocean. That can be quite dangerous at times. And so there's kind of this nickname, right? We also, in the Dust Bowl time, they had a name for these Oklahoma farmers that were leaving and coming to California. They called them Okies. Well, now we got zonies from Arizona, right? But anyways, that's the Sun Belt region. So let me go ahead and see what they're really looking at on page 90 for you. But that's just what the Sun Belt region is, Yasmin. So 88, 89, 90. And Sun Belt, yeah. So as higher education opportunities and new technologies rapidly expand, increasing social mobility, encourage the migration of middle class to the suburbs. Suburbs is kind of where I'm from. You guys, suburbs is kind of like more like West Hills and those areas. Elk Hone's considered an urban environment because it has so many people so close to each other in the apartments. A suburb is like the neighborhood with the families. And I'm going to say it's basically like an entire city of the friendly village that's next to where Natasha is, if you know Natasha Mortera, or right over, at the very beginning of get off of Madison, right? No, Molson, right? Right when you get off of Molson, off the freeway, and you go to that friendly village, the gated one. And I know it may not be so friendly and scary. People like to counter me about this, but that's the idea. It's these communities, these homes that have a front lawn, a backyard, it has a garage, and it's just nothing but homes and homes and homes. And people travel using their cars from the suburbs to the cities where they find work. Okay. So the Sun Belt region emerged as a significant political and economic force, right? San Diego, is California a very important economic force? Absolutely, right? We're literally, I think, the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world, right? So if you're to take us out of the United States, we imagine number 4. That means we're buying and producing the most amount of things, a lot of great things. A lot of our internet companies come south of San Francisco in a place called Silicon Valley, kind of close to where Stanford is. So we have a lot of political and economic. I mean, there's the word higher education. If you think of our UC system, it is definitely the UCLA, UC San Diego. These are consistently top 20 schools, top 25 schools in the United States. And these are public education, right? They're much cheaper than the private educations of the Harvard, the Yales, the Cornells that we were talking about earlier. So the Sun Belt region shows up as a political and economic force. You know, if you look at the history of Florida over the last about 20, 25 years, they've been really significant in choosing who the president's going to be. We always know that California is worth a lot of electoral votes because of its population, and we know that always goes Democrat. So it's a significant political and economic force. So that's the Sun Belt region, right? People don't want to live up where it's cold or where tornadoes blow up or where hurricanes happen. And they love San Diego. Sure, we may have earthquakes, but look at you guys. You guys have practically lived a lifetime without really a massive earthquake. I mean, we get these wildfires occasionally, but it's not that bad. It's not as bad as some of these other things, and it gets super hot. It's super cold. I'm sure some of you guys have lived in different parts of the United States, and it's, you know, you have real winters and real summers, you know, and I know it gets hot in El Cajon, but nothing like 110, 120 with crazy humidity. So people are attracted to live in these nice areas, and because of, you know, our technologies that probably create climate change earlier, whether it be transportation and cars or the air conditioning or moving water, large amounts of water. I mean, this goes back to your geography classes. If you guys remember how we move water in California, without these technologies, the Sun Belt region would be a massive desert, but we're able to use those. Or in Florida, a massive swamp, right? It's very, very wet over there and marshy, right? Alligators and stuff like that. So without these technologies, populations would have not gone there. Without air conditioning, I guarantee Florida would not be nearly as populated as it is now. And because of those things, this area, which is basically the southern part of the United States, the Sun Belt region, is a strong force because we have a lot of people. And with a lot of people comes a lot more votes. And with a lot more people comes a lot more taxes and workers. And that means you're an economic force as well. All right. So America lost the Vietnam War. If so, did we suffer from this loss? Yeah. I mean, it's you know, going back to Hillary, it's a pretty gnarly part of our history, right? The Vietnam War, right? A lot of people say the Iraq War is our Vietnam War. The Afghan War is our Vietnam War. We are not winning, you know. And it's basically us going into foreign countries and fighting on the behalf of maybe a small group of people that might be against the majority of how the people believe. You know, we don't surrender. We just leave Vietnam, you know, and Vietnam actually turns communist. I mean, I made a mistake in the other class by showing Vietnam. I thought Ho Chi Minh City was up where Hanoi is up in the north, but it's actually down in the south. Why? Because when they come down, I think that was actually called Dien Bien Phu, was the name of the city. And then it got changed over to Ho Chi Minh City, I believe, if history serves me correctly. So there we go. So we didn't, oh, sorry, going back to your loss, but did we lose? Well, obviously we got a lot of money lost. A lot of soldiers died. You know, I listened to a lot of punk rock music, and we used something called Agent Orange. Agent Orange was basically a massive pesticide that we sprayed all over the forest because the Viet Cong, aka the North Vietnamese Communist Army, often hid in there. And so we thought if we just destroy the entire forest, and that's not an environmental disaster there, but if we destroy the entire forest with this massive pesticide called Agent Orange, and again, if you want to Google it, you guys can, you know, just Google this term within a couple seconds, I think you'll get it. But Agent Orange was sprayed all over. I mean, this was sprayed on top of our soldiers. They later developed cancer. These were sprayed on the civilians in Vietnam. They were put down. All these stories of how soldiers were being treated, how they treated people during the My Lai massacre comes out. There's a lot of marijuana and drug use among our soldiers over there. Our soldiers come back, and the hippies can't believe that they were the ones that went over, and they're spat on. And when spat on, I mean, they're literally getting spit on when they come in. I mean, if you a lot of homeless on our streets are actually Vietnam War veterans suffering from PTSD, and you know, which is insane. I mean, our homeless are about, I think it's about 70% of the homeless population are veterans of some sort, and a lot of them are coming from the Vietnam War, where because of this legacy of fighting this war that we lost, and the way that we handled the war, and really what did it prove? Absolutely nothing. The United States kept on going, but all these young boys died and lost. The legacy of Vietnam is really one of shame on the United States history. It's one of these wars that we look at and we go, wow, I can't believe we did that, and I can't believe that we lost, type of thing. So, you know, Nixon, bows us out of it. He basically says that he says it needs to be Vietnamized. The United States is going to slowly go out. We're going to, same if this sounds familiar. We're going to train the Vietnamese how to control our own thing. What did we do in Iraq? Oh, our job, now that we got Saddam Hussein, is to get out, but we're going to train the Iraqi security force to have safety and security. And then ISIS blows up. What are we doing with the in Afghanistan? We are training the Afghan security forces against the Taliban. Why? We're not winning, so we're going to train the Afghans and slowly go out, right? And we have now these advisors. What did we send in Vietnam at first? Advisors. What do advisors do? Advising the people on how to fight this war. So, when you say we suffer, yeah, it's still, you talk to my parents about the Vietnam War, and it was one that brought a lot of shame to the United States. And especially for, like I said, the soldiers that were returned back home, they're being screamed at right when they get off of they have these war protesters and hippies over here. And right when they're coming off of the planes, they're saying they're called baby killers, they're called mass murderers. People are spitting on them. People are burning the flag in their face. And, I have a buddy that, fought a lot of wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. And when he comes back now, he's like, hey, people don't get the things that we have to go through. And then I go over here and it seems like people take it for granted. So I just can't imagine what some of the veterans felt. And a lot of them, like I said, suffer from PTSD. There are now a lot of the homeless on our streets. So I think we suffered immensely because of the Vietnam War. It's definitely a black eye in American history that we got. Okay, especially because we're fighting this untrained Vietnamese army, right? That it was getting money and guns from China through Russia because they're all communists, and they're getting some outside help. But nonetheless, this is the American military. We had helicopters and fighter jets, and all they had, and Agent Orange, and all they had, napalm, excuse me. And like I said, the helicopter is really a very important new technology that's used in Vietnam to transfer people. And despite all this, they still were able to win, and kind of one lesson of the Vietnam War is like, don't go to other people's homes and fight, because they know where to hide and they are going to fight harder than you are because it's their home. And again, you see this in Iraq and ISIS, where we had these insurgents that, they still continue to ward off the security forces or the American military, because guess what? It's their home. They're going to fight a little bit harder than a bunch of Americans that came from Texas and don't even know, what a Chaldean is. Like I did. Right? I didn't know that until I came to El Cajon, and when I lived in San Clemente. So yeah, so I think we did suffer. Can you explain what Truman's executive order is? I don't know. Yasmin, can you tell me what executive order is? I know the Truman Doctrine was one on containment, that we need to contain communism, right? That word keeps on popping up. Hindering. So, Yasmin, if you can give me the actual executive order, or kind of describe what the order was doing, or page number, or some kind of more of a key term, because what the executive order is, Barack Obama said the executive order is called the DREAM Act, and it basically said that if you're an illegal immigrant, or you're an immigrant without documentation, right? I don't like to say the word illegal immigrant, but immigrant without documentation, and you go to college and you're successful in being in college, that you will get citizenship, right? These dreamers were brought here to the United States as young kids, and they want to have the American dream, so let them do that. And then Donald Trump did another executive order to take it out. So you have to be a little bit clear about the executive order. So we'll get to that in a second. We'll go to hindering. What is a burgeoning private sector and key concepts? 831A, page 90. 831A, page 90. Gotcha. So 831A, page 90, a burgeoning private sector, federal spending, the baby boom and technology developments help spur economic growth. Burgeoning means just to get bigger. Private means private companies, not public companies. So the Sears, the Walmarts, the Home Depots, all of those became very successful. We embraced capitalism at certain levels with a little bit of New Deal touch and a little Great Society touch and occasional opportunities for unions, definitely for the 1970s. But a burgeoning private sector is just private businesses are exploding at this time. And remember, this is talking all the way to 1989, right? And so, again, the baby boom. What is the baby boom? You might want to circle that. If you look at our birth rates, which is the number of obviously children that are being born, our birth rates go through the roof after 1945. I wonder why. A bunch of young boys who have been fighting the Japanese in the Pacific and the Nazis in Europe have come home in 1945. I mean, one of the most iconic photographs of all time in World War II is that one guy kissing that girl in Times Square, right? If you've gone to downtown San Diego and gone to the Uss Midway, which was a boat that actually fought in multiple wars, it was commissioned just at the end of World War II. That means it was built right at the end of World War II. It was going out to fight the Japanese, but I think the war ended before it actually did that. Then they went to Korea, and then it actually went to Vietnam as well. So it has that little history there. But right next to it is that same picture. And so all these young boys and men have come back from war. There's no more war. They don't have to go to war. So what are they going to do? They're going to start a family. And so we have this massive, what we call baby boom at this time. And I've kind of talked to you guys about, population and taxes and Social Security and the environment, right? The reason why China got rid of the one-child law is because guess what? You want a lot of young people, and those young people are going to buy stuff. And if you have more people buying stuff, the prices are going to go up, and supplies are going to go down, and wages are going to go up, and the price of goods are going to up, and people are going to make more and more money. And then more and more money means more and more taxes, and more taxes. You can pay for things like the retirement, Social Security, a bigger military, da 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 da. And so having people are good. And so this baby boom definitely helps out. And I don't think we need to go talk about technology from, computers to the dot-com revolution. Obviously, we began and focusing on our businesses, focus a lot of our technology. And that's why a lot of our immigrants come here today is for these job opportunities, right? For economic growth. All right. So there's that. I believe Yasmin is okay. So 8.12a, page 85. So let's get to Yasmin, what she's saying, and then we'll get to Nora. Thank you, Nora, for trying to figure this out. 8.12a. Americans debated policies and methods as well as communists within the blah, 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 contain communism and believes or is in 8.1 that been discrimination in a public place. Well, discrimination in a public place means any type of government in place, like whether it be the FBI, the IRS, or the Library of Congress, should not have discrimination, even though it is allowed in Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. So yeah, now let me look at Executive Order 9, and then I'll get to you, Aisha. Executive Order, what is it? 9981. Executive Order 9981. Issued July, terminated policy discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, ensure that the end of segregation of services. So again, this is just saying that we're not going to have discrimination, we're not going to have racism anymore. And what that did was eventually led to all of the Army, the Navy, what we call the armed services, all of our military basically was blended into one. No longer would you have a black battalion or a somewhat black regiment or whatever they'll use to describe a group of people, right? African Americans, Indians, whites, Asians are all going to get mixed in the military. They're not going to be separated. And that's interesting is that, here we see the federal government. I mean, what's the point here? Here we see the federal government making stands about desegregating well before Brown versus the Board of Education, right? Which is going to really force the states to fall in line, right? It's going to really take a big nip out of the idea of this, or it's going to really try to solidify the problems of the Civil War, which is this racism and this slavery institution by saying, no, separating equals not okay. So. And it's just interesting that the federal government's doing it. And what do they have to do? Brown versus the Board of Education has to force the states, and especially obviously which states, the southern states who are primarily more racist, to comply with not having separate but equal and desegregating. That means mixing all these different groups together. All right. Immigration law of 1965. Don't know, but I'd rather just Google it than look at it over there. Immigration Act of 1965. Click. The Immigration Naturalization Act of 1965, also known as the Hart-Celler Act, abolished an earlier quota system based on national origin, established new immigration policy on reuniting immigrant families and attracting skilled labor in the United States. Yeah, so before that, there was a quota, right? So they'd say, okay, we're going to get, of all the 100% of immigrants we're going to have this year, 5% are going to be Japanese, 4% are going to be Chinese, 10% are going to be Italian, 15 are, and it goes on and on and on. What they did is they said, you know what, that's not what it's all about. Some people have come over here to the United States and they have become successful workers, but they have left their family behind. Those people get to come, right? A lot of you guys that are immigrants to the United States was based off of this, right? You were fleeing as a family and you were given asylum as refugees. The second one was this, skilled labor. All right. So that, guess what? If you're currently today, we attract a lot of specifically Indian programmers, right? They're saying that there's not enough American computer programmers for our need for some of the software that we're doing. And so they're actually hiring Indians. And Indians already speak English over there. They have a strong education base over there based off of technology. They feel like they're better programmers than we are. And so they're coming over here and taking jobs. But that's okay according to this act. Again, what was a quota before? A certain amount of people from a certain country were allowed. They said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to basically choose people based off of their country that they're coming from. We're going to choose them based off of their family that needs help, and or do they have some kind of skills that the United States needs and possesses. The Executive 981 increased participation in KKK. Oh, most likely. Yeah, great reaction. Or definitely anytime, you know, this is the same thing when that thing happened with the bump stock, and they actually, just a heads up, I think it was about a week and a half ago, those were ruled illegal, and anybody that has them is illegal. But what's a bump stock? It turned like an M16 into a semi-automatic, just 111 into a fully automatic gun. What happened immediately when there was talks about this is that all of those sold out, right? People just started buying them and storing them. When Barack Obama actually got elected, when they finally knew he was elected, gun sales just went up the roof because they thought that he was going to start, you know, attacking the rights. And so people just start buying guns, right? So in this situation, you know, when there's one step towards desegregation, the group that doesn't like it is obviously going to get a little bit more frustrated and feel like it's losing. And anytime you begin losing things, you get a little bit more desperate. So I wouldn't doubt that the KKK and nativist groups continually pop up during these experiences. Can you explain what the Great Society was and its job? Yeah, we kind of talked about that in the other class, Raneem, in period 3. So I'm going to be really quick to it. I call it kind of New Deal Part 3. There was the first New Deal, the second New Deal, then Lyndon B. Johnson really wants to help all. And we talked about 2 programs, most specifically Medicaid and Medicare. Most of our students get something called Medi-Cal, which is California version of Medicaid. Medicaid is what we call the federal or whole United States program. But what California does is it gets a certain amount of money from the federal government, from Washington, D.C., and create a program called Medi-Cal. And then actually got even more money in Medi-Cal by raising taxes, ensuring that everybody in the United States, in California, excuse me, gets some kind of insurance. So there's that. That's the Great Society. There's also one thing. I don't know, if you Google Great Society, it shows you like his program. The war on poverty, the idea that they began increasing welfare at this time. And so, environmental initiatives. One thing that always comes up in the history of this time is, Lyndon B. Johnson is stuck dealing with Vietnam. And so I told the other class, he goes, damn this war, or damn this blooded, judged war, right? He's like, I don't care about the Vietnam War. I'm really focused here on the United States, but everybody's telling me I can't be soft on communism. I can't lose another country like we did in North Korea to communism. And good gracious, I got to do it. So rolling. I just realized I was wearing a military hat. There we go. America. It's actually San Diego Gulls hockey team. It's their military appreciation night, though. San Diego has a lot of military. The military industrial complex is very strong in San Diego, as we know. All right, last one, Aisha, and I'm calling it a night. It's 9 o'clock. I'm tired. So the Brown versus Board of Education. Really important one. There's a little girl who wants to go to school, but the school's all white. And she basically brings this up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically overrules Plessy versus Ferguson. So let's go review Plessy versus Ferguson. It said this: things must be separate but equal. Then Brown versus the Board of Education said no, 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 no. Things, when segregation is a form of racism, and that is illegal in the United States, all people should be treated equally. And so this student has a chance to go to that school. I think there was a total of 9 students that actually finally went to under this. Brown didn't really go. I think Brown actually might be a lawyer or something that represents the child. I don't even know. But this allows, I think it was these 9. I don't know what state it was, but there's all these scenes. Let me see if I can try to Google it for you guys. But there's basically these 9 African Americans going to all white school, and they're like surrounded by policemen. And basically all of the white students are just screaming all of those horrible racist names that you hear in the Elkhorn Valley High School hallways, and just like really bad words. So let me see if I can figure that out for you. School African American students in the school after Brown. Let me see if I can click images. Yeah. I know. I put African American students in the school after Brown, and then this on this top right, you got this race mixing is I don't know what it says. Stop the race mixing. Race mixing is intolerable or something. I can't find the picture, but let me see this. We put maybe police protect African American students after Brown ruling. It's not there either. School integration. I'm sorry, I know I'm going off on a tangent here. School integration in the 1950s. Yeah, there's not really that picture. It's funny. I put school integration 1960s, and then the 4th picture says this: communists infiltrated our churches, now integrates our schools. Again, there's no word communism, man. There's just we use the word terrorism like the word communism. Anyway. So yeah, anyways, Brown versus Board of Education allowed the desegregation of schools in all public institutions. You cannot have a separate drinking fountain or bathroom in the library. Also, that moved on to now private places. They extended on private places. You can't have separate movie theaters or separate seating for movie theaters. The whole bus thing, the bus boycott now is illegal. You can't have African Americans or other minority groups sit in the back while other people can sit in front or wherever they want to sit, even though kids love sitting in the back today. Very confusing. This is more period 6 or 7. If we had a Chinese exclusion, why did we ally with them and try to protect them during World War II? Because of Japanese. Bam. And the Chinese Exclusion Act, why was that happening? Because we wanted to stop them from taking our jobs in the West Coast. Right? Just like the Japanese internment is primarily a West Coast thing. There's no Japanese on the East Coast. There's no Japanese in New York getting thrown in internment camps. What is kind of interesting, the little historian note, is there's about, because I obviously did a lot of research since my family was involved in this, there were approximately, I think, 3,000 Germans and Italians that actually were thrown in internment camps over on the East Coast in New York that were seen as a threat to the United States. Now, that doesn't even compare to the 160,000 Japanese citizens, and and 2/3 of them being Japanese American citizens like myself who were given the due rights of law and citizenship. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting note that we had some Japanese, and we had some Germans and Italians, excuse me, that because of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini during World War II were considered spies, threats to the United States, and also thrown in internment camps as well. It's a often forgotten story. Everybody just remembers Japanese, but they don't know the German and the Italian story as well. And then that's the Chinese Exclusion Act. All right. Oh yeah, remember the Chinese made a lot of money during the gold rush, right? Miners really didn't make any money. The people basically took their gold and said, well, somebody needs to wash your clothes and nobody else is here. So they jacked up the prices of the laundry and they took the gold. The hardware stores are actually the craziest story. The people who invest in the hardware stores at the beginning of San Francisco made billions of dollars because all these people would show up. They're like, I need a shovel and I need a gold pan. They're like, cool, shovels are about $3,000 and that gold pan will cost you about $5,000. Like, we don't have that. Like, that's all right. You just sign right here and say you'll pay it with gold when you find it. Like, okay, well, I'm going to find a lot of gold and I'll pay you back. We're like, no worries. I just got $13,000 richer. So. No, Hendrine, we're not going to turn that in. Let's not worry about homework. Let's worry about questions. I'll talk about that. That'll be due after break. Yasmin, are we going to review in class tomorrow? Yep, we definitely are. Again, we haven't had a chance to really get to the DBQ, but I'm thinking that on Monday we'll spend a lot of time looking at that DBQ one more time and giving you guys an hour to kind of help each other out. And if you need some specific help, I'll be there to help you out. So yeah, we'll be reviewing in class tomorrow. I'll let you guys go. It's a short day, unfortunately. You know, it feels like a regular day goes by in about 15 minutes, and tomorrow's a minimum day. So we'll probably have 6 minutes to say something and then move on. We'll check one Google search and one Google image. All right, guys. 9:05. This has been a long week. Thank you for continuing, kids. I saw up to like 13 to 14 of us, so good job for you guys. I want to keep on telling you guys big thank you for taking an hour of your life on top of the homework and on top of all the busyness that you guys have to be successful. I really hope this pays off. I think you guys are understanding the game of the test and the game of writing, and we'll focus a little bit more next week on writing. And when we get back from break, we'll be focusing a lot on the short answer and LEQs to give us a way to review. I think you guys are good on the multiple choice. It is what it is. So I think you guys are in a good spot, man. I know that we're shoving some stuff down your throat, but I know you guys trust me on how we're going to be able to approach the test. So good for you guys and spending some time, you know, tonight with me and trying to figure that out, asking great questions. Hendrine, you didn't get us too off task, so off task, excuse me. So good job for you. No worries, guys. You guys have a good one, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Laters.